I'm your bedtime historian. Funny how a place that smells of fish guts and human fear could feel like the start of something grand. Isn't it? London's Tudor docks, where you've just arrived, were less gateway to glory and more trapdoor to trouble. Step onto these creaking planks with me for a moment. The air is thick with tar-rotting eel skins and a sour tang that makes you swallow twice. Behind you, the river swells with ships carrying spices, silk, and if gossip's to be trusted, rat-born curses bound for every cobblestone street. Somewhere in that mess, you're just another figure hunched against the wind. If this tale already tickles your sleepy curiosity, maybe slip your thumb toward like and subscribe. Call it a poor man's protection spell, less effective than a garlic sachet, but cheaper than paying off a dock guard. Ever wonder what other souls washed ashore here before you? Whisper your thoughts below if you've got a favorite ghost from history, someone you think might have braved these docks long before you did. Now pull your cloak tighter. Listen to the gulls cry overhead and come ashore with me. We're about to find out if you'd survive even one foggy Tudor morning. The gangplank shudders under your boots as you step off the ship and onto England's damp welcome mat. Behind you, the sailors unload barrels of dried cod and crates stuffed with who knows what. Some boxes rattle, some smell of cloves and nutmeg. Sweet luxuries that might never touch your lips. You're not here for cargo. You're here to see if your bones can dodge hunger disease and the watchful eyes of men who'd sell your secrets for a groat. New arrivals are easy prey. Dock hands lean on crates, spitting brown juice from chewed tobacco. They watch you like hungry cats. The city guards stand back more interested in bribes than your well-being. They say the plague sometimes sails in hidden beneath fish scales or slips ashore in a sailor's coughing fit. Some historians claim no port kept decent records of how many infected travelers slipped through. Others argue that's exactly how London's back alleys stayed full of nameless dead. A sharp voice cracks through the morning fog, an official demanding port fees you don't have. He's got yellowed teeth and a ledger fatter than a bishop's purse. If you've no coin, your choices dwindle. Find work fast, or find a corner to vanish in before dusk. They say one slip, one argument with the wrong guard could see you dragged to the stocks for a made-up crime. So you nod, you bow, you promise payment tomorrow. A rat scurries over your boot, bold as a tax collector. Somewhere up the quay, a fishmonger tosses fish heads to the tide. You wonder if you'll end up like that, picked clean and thrown to the river's hunger. But you keep moving. Past the barrels of tar, the rope slick with river slime. You pass a boy, no older than 12, hauling salted herring on his back, his ribs visible through a grimy shirt. Some say children worked the docks harder than grown men because they cost half as much and complained half as often. There's no record that counts how many children slipped off the docks and vanished into the gray, but scraps of parish notes hint at more than the city would admit. Your stomach knots at the idea of finding food, but first comes lodging, if you can call it that. The dockside inns reek of ale sweat and old straw mattresses crawling with bedbugs bigger than fleas. You peek inside a tavern doorway and see a man half asleep over a tankard shoes stolen right off his feet by some nimble-fingered thief. A serving girl eyes you newcomers mean coin or trouble or both. She turns away before you can ask the price of a night under her roof. A gull lands on a pile of fish guts, tears at the scraps. London is a city that feeds on itself fish, to merchant, to tavern, to gossip to gallows. And you, Right now, you're just hoping no one notices how thin your purse strings dangle. You press on shoes, squelching in puddles of river water and filth. A man coughs behind a stack of cargo. You wonder if it's just the cold or something worse. The rumor among sailors is that plague rats come ashore with every barrel. Some insist the air itself is bad. Herbal pouches hang from a few necks, desperate charms against foul humors. They don't help much, but they make the fearful feel braver. Historians still debate if the plague arrived by ship by rat or by pure bad luck, but they all agree the docks were the city's beating infected heart. You pause at the edge of an alleyway, the Thames muttering behind you like a restless old god. Ahead, London. Narrow streets, shuttered windows, secrets behind every crooked door, and you, a stranger, hoping to pass unseen, to find a meal, a bed, and the next dawn. Tonight, you've made it off the gangplank. Tomorrow, that's a gamble between your wits and the city's appetite. The wooden door creaks like a gossiping neighbor when you push it open. Welcome to the quest for somewhere, anywhere to lay your head tonight. London's streets are clogged with bodies by day, but by night, they're just as crowded, only quieter, darker, and full of secrets best left unsaid. Finding a bed here costs more than a whole day hauling fish guts at the docks, which means, for you and everyone like you, real sleep is a luxury sold by the inch. Some historians argue whether Tudor bed sheets were ever clean enough to be worth the coin. Others say cleanliness never mattered, warmth did. And so warmth is what you hunt for now. A tavern at the end of Fish Street promises a corner of straw and maybe a mug of weak ale if you're lucky. Inside, the air is sour with old sweat and cheap beer. A single candle, guttering near the hearth, throws shadows across the faces of the desperate dockhands beggars, a few sailors too broke for the inns by the river. The landlord's eyes flick over you, weighing your worth. No coin, no bed. But if you've a penny, well then there's a rope with your name on it. You hear it before you see it. A thick hemp rope strung wall to wall across a cramped back room. Dozens lean on it, like tired laundry bodies, draped forward, snoring, coughing, dreaming of better nights. For 1 penny, you're allowed to rest your weight on the rope till sunrise. Then the landlord cuts it loose, and down you go onto the filthy floor, times up onto the next poor soul waiting for your spot. You could do worse. The street outside holds doorways and church steps where the unlucky curl up like stray dogs. Parish records hint at dozens freezing stiff in the London frost each winter. Some scribes wrote that God takes the poor, first a neat excuse for the living to step over the dead come dawn. You weigh your options by the hearth. A real bed straw tick flea-ridden blanket might cost you a shilling or two more than you have. The rope, though humiliating, is at least warmish, surrounded by the fug of other bodies. You think of the docks, the boy hauling herring, the guards eyeing your pockets, the rumors of plague riding the fog. Here, at least you'll last the night if you guard your purse and keep your boots on. A brawl erupts near the bar. 2 men arguing over who stole whose last crumb of cheese. A chair tips over. The landlord bellows. A dog under the table snarls at the noise. This is no place for heroes or gentlefolk. You're just another shadow, hoping no one notices you've nothing left to steal. Through a cracked window, the city hums outside distant bells, a drunk singing about Queen Bess, the hush of the Thames licking its banks. Sleep won't come easy here, but it might come all the same. And in Tudor London, that's enough. Some scholars wonder how many city folk lived half-awake dreams weighed down by hunger and cold. Few diaries survive from the working poor, but scraps of court testimony tell tales of drunks nodding off on church steps and waking up robbed blind or never waking at all. A woman with a basket of stale bread stumbles in her eyes, scanning the room for buyers. She trades crusts for pennies, slipping coin into her bodice before the landlord spots her cutting into his ale sales. You catch her eye. She offers you a hunk so hard it might break a tooth, but it's better than an empty stomach come morning. The rope looks better and better. You hand over your single penny fingers, reluctant to let go of your only armor against the night. The landlord points you toward the back. A space opens between a snoring sailor and a ragged apprentice boy who can't be more than 13. You hook your arms over the rope, lean forward, and let the ache in your legs drain away. This is what passing for sleep costs you tonight: 1 penny a stiff back, and the risk that someone might lift your purse while you dream. But you'd rather hang here like old laundry than shiver in the gutter with the frost biting your feet off. A gentle mercy London style. Somewhere in the room, a man coughs so hard he bends double. You hear Mutter's plague, or just the ale. No one knows. No one wants to find out. Eyes close tighter, heads drop lower on the rope. The candle sputters its last gasp of flame. Shadows settle in, tucking the restless bodies into a blanket only the desperate know. Your eyes grow heavy. Outside, London sleeps too uneasy, hungry dreaming of tomorrow's coin. But for now, you sway with the rope's gentle promise. Morning will come, if you're lucky. Morning seeps into the tavern like cold soup, thin, lukewarm, and not nearly enough to revive you. The rope gave out hours ago, dropped you and a dozen other half-dreamers onto the splintered floorboards. You stretch stiff shoulders and peel straw from your hair, then listen to your belly's first demand of the day breakfast, if you can call it that in Tudor London. Outside, the streets churn awake with hooves and boots, merchants and beggars weaving through damp alleys. You follow your nose towards something warm, any hint of bread porridge or the promise of ale week, though it may be. Some historians say ale was safer than the water, teeming as the Thames was, with refuse and secrets nobody wanted to fish out. It's debated whether this was truly necessity or just the best excuse to start the day tipsy. You drift into a yard behind the tavern where a cook ladles thin gruel into chipped bowls. Steam curls in the dawn air, but the smell is more boiled sock than feast. For the nobles in their walled gardens, breakfast might mean sweetmeats, imported fruit, or swan pie spiced with cinnamon from half a world away. But for you, and for the bulk of London's poor, a stale crust dipped in ale is the meal you'll dream of calling hearty. A queue forms behind you, dock hands with blistered palms, a maid with her apron stained from yesterday's labor, a toothless peddler clutching a sack of wilting onions he hopes to sell by nightfall. You clutch your bowl closer, hoping nobody eyes your meager portion too hungrily. A boy beside you snaps up a drop scrap of barley bread before it hits the mud. You lock eyes for a heartbeat somewhere in that look. Is the truth of Tudor London, hunger doesn't wait for manners. It's said that a misplaced insult over breakfast could ruin reputations or worse. The wrong joke about the Queen, an idle rumor whispered at a neighbor's table. There are records of men hauled before church courts for careless words, forced to kneel in penance for insulting bread that wasn't theirs to mock. Nearby, a cook slaps a hand away from the pot, too many fingers snatching second helpings they can't pay for. The pot hisses over coals' thin steam, carrying the scent of barley and bean staples of the city's poor. There's a half-whispered rumor that the cook waters the pot with river water when no one's looking. Some scholars argue about it still. Did the poor drink more from the Thames than they should have? Or did rumor alone poison London's faith in its own breakfast? You sip the warm ale. It's watery sour, but safer than the well. It slides down your throat, chases sleep from your bones, and leaves you half full better than nothing. Your mind drifts to the feasts you'll never taste, pies stuffed with pigeon or venison trenchers soaked in gravy, peacock with gilded feathers, a spectacle made to flaunt wealth more than fill stomachs. Those stories drift through the taverns, carried on breath, heavy with envy. A soft laugh catches your ear, two men deep in ale, swapping tales about a lord's breakfast gone wrong. The rumor goes that one slip of etiquette at the wrong noble's table could unmake a man. No elbows on the table, no speaking before spoken to, no reaching across a dish that wasn't offered. Surviving a meal with the highborn required a nimble tongue and an even nimbler sense of when to keep it still. You tear another bite of bread. It grits between your teeth, a reminder that no matter who you are, your breakfast marks your place. Out here, among the alley kitchens and cheap ale, you're just another mouth to feed one that might go hungry tomorrow if you're unlucky or careless. Some parish clerks scribbled notes about families breaking bread crusts into broth, stretching one meal over 3 days. Surviving wasn't about feasting. It was about pretending hunger wasn't gnawing at your ribs. A dog noses your foot-tail, wagging more from hope than trust. You flick at a crumb, there's camaraderie in shared scraps. It vanishes under a cart crumb in mouth eyes, bright with the victory of the moment. You envy it in a way. A dog's worry is today's meal, not tomorrow's master or next week's rent. Behind you, the line grows longer. The pot grows lighter. The cook's eyes dart toward the street. Too many hungry bellies. Too few coins clinking in grimy palms. London wakes hungry, feeds itself just enough to keep moving. Then dreams of better bread that never comes. Your bowl is empty. You scrape the last smear with your finger, savor the warmth fading from your stomach. The air bites at your skin. The day calls full of filth to hall floors to scrub, or trinkets to peddle if you want to afford tonight's rope to lean on. Breakfast in Tudor England, barley beans, weak ale, and a question that lingers on your tongue. How many mornings like this can you survive? The air tastes of soot and sweat long before the sun climbs high enough to chase off the river fog. Your stomach still complaining about that thin breakfast reminds you there's no time to linger. If you're to make it through another dusk in Tudor London, you'll need work, any work, no matter how grimy or mean it leaves your hands. So you slip back into the streets, boots squelching through last night's rain, and whatever else the city dribbles from its gutters. Some say London's filth was both its curse and its lifeline. Laborers always needed, so long as someone was willing to carry waste hall water or scrub the stones clean enough for noble boots to click along without complaint. Historians still argue whether Tudor laborers were truly free or just bound by invisible chains of hunger and debt. One thing is certain, you're about to find out. A boy near Cornhill calls out for hands. There's a brewer's cart stuck in the muck again. You and 3 other half-starved souls put shoulders to the barrel-laden wagon, straining until your back pops like old timber. The brewer tosses you half a penny, barely enough for the next stale loaf. You pocket it anyway. Pride has no stomach here. By midday, you're in a narrow yard behind a merchant's house. A matron stands at the door, pointing her broom like a commander's baton. Scrub the floorboards, beat the rugs, haul water from the street pump. Her voice slices through the air sharper than any blade. You nod, tongue tucked behind your teeth, better to hold it than risk her docking your pitiful wage for backtalk. Some records survive that speak of servants fined a week's pay for breaking a dish or daring to mutter at the wrong moment. On your knees, you scour rush mats that reek of spilled ale and dog fur. Each stroke leaves your knuckles raw, your thoughts drifting to the other poor devils of London who shuffle through the same grind. Servants, apprentices, street hawkers, they form the city's backbone, half invisible, wholly exhausted. A slip of the hand, a word too sharp, and you might find yourself tossed back onto the street with nothing but your bruises for company. Out in the alley, you catch sight of a ragged vendor, calling his wares pins, ribbons, a scrap of lace. He's a hawker, half beggar, half salesman, hoping to charm a penny from housewives and maids. If you're clever, that could be you next week. Trinkets weighing down your pockets instead of your shoulders weighed down by buckets. There's a freedom in it, so they say. Some scholars still debate whether hawkers truly had it easier than servants, or if they just starved more creatively. The matron's shadow falls over you. She inspects your work sniffs, then mutters about how the last boy scrubbed better. You bow your head, swallow the sting. She tosses you a crust of bread payment, apparently for your back and knees. Your coin, that'll come at the week's end if she remembers, and if you're not replaced by some cousin's nephew with a stronger back. Evening seeps in slow as treacle. The city hums with the clatter of carts, the cries of fishwives packing up for the day, the distant peal of a church bell calling the devout, or at least those hoping to keep the parish watchful eyes off their sins. You lean against a low wall, licking the last crumbs from your palm. A pair of boys dart past, bare feet slapping the stones, a stolen apple between them. The vendor they robbed shouts half-hearted curses, but doesn't give chase. He knows as well as you do that London's cobbles protect the quick and swallow the slow. A woman beside you, older back, bent from too many days, like yours, chuckles when she sees your empty hands. She mutters that the city feeds you just enough to keep you crawling back for more. Maybe she's right. Maybe tomorrow you'll try hawking. Or maybe you'll find a master who wants an apprentice, someone to teach you a trade, wrap you in rules, keep you under thumb for 7 years in exchange for the hope of your own shop one day. That's if you're lucky. Some apprentices never get their freedom. Some masters work them to the bone, then toss them out when trade sours. London's streets darken as the sun dips behind soot-stained rooftops. Lanterns flicker to life, feeble stars, trying to keep the night at bay. You tuck your tiny earnings into a hidden seam of your coat, counting them once, twice, as if wishing might multiply the pennies by morning. You glance down at your raw hands, the grime under your nails, a badge that no noble eyes will ever see or care about. Some days, the city chews you up for its own profit. Other days, it lets you gnaw, back just enough to wake hungry again. Tomorrow, the river will still stink. The streets will still spit out more work than you can stomach. And you, if you're clever, will still be here to drag your feet toward the next day's scraps. London's streets are cruel enough by day. By dusk, they become a tangle of shadows that breathe and scurry when you're not looking. You tug your collar higher, mindful of the wind that carries rumors just as easily as it carries sickness. They say a single cough could end your story quicker than any pickpocket's blade. And here among the maze of alleys and slop-filled gutters, you learn the city's most whispered truth. If the filth doesn't kill you, the plague or pox just might. You step over a channel of runoff that oozes through the cobblestones, thick with kitchen scraps and worse. Some swear these open drains are the real veins of London carrying secrets and disease from door to door. You pass a street barber hawking his services beside a grimy sign, promising fresh bloodletting tooth pulling and pestilence cures. His knives gleam under the flickering lantern wiped on his apron, as if that's enough to banish sickness. Some historians argue whether these barbers did more harm than good. Others believe they were the only doctors the poor could afford. You pull away before he can wave you closer. Instead, you press into the flow of bodies inching through Pudding Lane. The name promises sweetness. What you get is a stew of rotting meat smells and the occasional waft of scorched bread. It's here you hear your first real plague whisper tonight. Two fishwives trade gossip over a basket of limp eels. They mutter about a family down by the wharf, 3 dead in as many days, boils and black spots hidden under hastily wrapped sheets. The city guard pretends not to hear, but everyone does. Rumor is more contagious than any sickness. You duck into a narrow passage between leaning buildings, half hoping the walls themselves might shield you. The wood creaks as if it remembers every cough that ever echoed here. In a dark corner, you see a girl, no older than 15, pressing sprigs of lavender into small cloth sachets. She offers one to you, for a farthing claims it'll ward off the bad air. You finger the brittle petals, the faint scent, a comfort more than a cure. Some scholars still argue whether people truly believe these sachets worked, or if clutching herbs was just a desperate ritual, like crossing yourself when the wind shifts wrong. You buy one anyway. Around your neck, it goes your tiny shield against invisible enemies. Maybe it'll help, maybe it won't, but hope is cheap insurance when real medicine's out of reach. Farther down the alley, you stumble across a gathering by candlelight, an old woman selling a salve she claims draws the sickness out through the soles of your feet. A cluster of ragged souls press coins into her palm, kneeling to smear foul-smelling grease onto their skin. You wonder how many of them will wake tomorrow, feeling cured only to find the lumps and sweats waiting beneath their blankets. Somewhere overhead, a shutter slams shut. You catch sight of a pale face peering through warped glass before vanishing into the gloom. Behind every door could be a house quarantined by rumor alone, a single sneeze enough to see the parish mark your door with a crude red cross. Few want to be locked inside with the sick. Fewer want to bury what's left when the parish bell tolls. You pass a line of carts, piled with straw mattresses, some bound for noble houses, others for plague pits, when the dead outnumber the words to name them. The air thickens with the smell of vinegar, another desperate ward against contagion. A drunk leans out a tavern door, hiccuping about foreigners, bringing pox on every merchant ship. His words slur into curses about Spanish traders, Dutch sailors, any unlucky soul with an accent thicker than the Thames fog. Blame is easy. Answers cost more than most can afford. A rat darts across your boot. You flinch. You think of the stories, how these small shadows slipped ashore in crates of grain and silk, bringing fleas that gnaw on more than crumbs. Historians bicker over whether rats alone birthed the plague or whether London's filth was plenty enough to do the job unaided. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. When the cough comes, it doesn't care who carried it here first. You stop at a market stall shuddering for the night. A woman wipes her hands on her apron eyes, darting from your threadbare coat to the sachet around your neck. She mutters a blessing under her breath, as if the herbs might protect her too if she doesn't stare too long. You nod, moving on. Suspicion can be more contagious than any pox. The lanterns flicker as you emerge back onto the main street. You clutch the lavender bag at your throat and wonder if this night were your last, would you know? Would the air taste different? Or would you drift off the same way you arrived, another ghost trailing your own breath through streets that will forget you by dawn? The city hums with secrets it's too tired to keep. And you, wrapped in your tiny charms and larger fears, walk on, hoping tomorrow you'll still be here to walk these alleys again. You slip through the crooked lanes until the scent of steamy air curls around your nose, thick with soap sweat, and the laughter of people pretending they're cleaner than the streets outside. Welcome to London's public bathhouse. If your nose wrinkles, you hide it. For many, this damp haven is the closest they'll get to feeling fresh, even if the gossip that floats with the steam sticks to skin longer than any grime ever could. You step through the low door, ducking your head so you don't knock your brow on the warped lintel. Inside, the world softens voices, muffled by dripping walls, and the hiss of heated water poured into wooden tubs. A boy no older than 14 sweeps wet rushes across the slick floor. He doesn't look up. Some say these bathhouse boys overheard more secrets than priests ever did, trading whispered tales for a half-penny tip or a leftover scrap of bread. A row of half-empty tubs lines one wall, some with steam curling from them like breath on a winter morning, others with water gone, lukewarm, slicked with soap bubbles and questionable flecks. You find a spot by the far end, furthest from the loudest gossipers. A bent old woman ladles water from a copper pot into your tub, her hands pink and cracked from decades of scalds. Historians still argue whether Tudor bathhouses spread more disease than they cured. Some say the warmth washed away filth and fear alike. Others point to the lice that survived every scrub and the fevers that never seemed to stay away for long. You strip down, easing into the shallow water that nips at your knees before embracing you whole. It's not exactly clean, someone before you left their soap film behind, but it's warm. And that's half the battle in a city that bites your bones through your clothes. You lean back against the tub's edge, letting your shoulders sink beneath the scented steam. Somewhere nearby, a man boasts about his cousin's trade in silk stockings, the kind only lords can wear. He says, as if it were his own gold stitched into every thread. Across the room, two women giggle behind a draped cloth. You catch snippets, someone's maid caught with a butcher's boy, rumors of a constable's mistress paid off in stolen spices. Bathhouses were confession boxes without the priest. Tongues wagged freely when skin was bare, and the city's dirt circled the drain instead of crusting under fingernails. Your eyes flutter closed for just a breath. The warmth seeps into your ribs. But you don't let your mind drift too far. Too many stories begin with a bath and end with more than soap left behind. A careless scrape of skin, a razor nick from a bathhouse barber, a lover's cough, 2 benches down. Sometimes a single drop of bad water found its way inside you and never left. Some scholars say the plague skipped the bathhouse altogether, too steamy for fleas. Others swear fleas thrived here, fat and happy, as customers slipped home, freshly scrubbed and newly doomed. A young girl shuffles by, dropping a fresh handful of rosemary into your tub. She claims it keeps evil humors away. The scent clings to the steam, sharp and green. You thank her with a nod you can barely muster. How many coins have you spent tonight? A few farthings for warm water, a penny for rosemary, a copper to tip the boy, sweeping the rushes so he won't pocket your boots, while your eyes drift shut. A man at the far end clears his throat loud enough to hush the laughter. He launches into a tale about a merchant who slipped in for a soak one winter night and left lighter by 2 rings and his purse. Some swear the thief still bathes here, hidden in plain sight, among the steam and soap. Others argue the story's older than the bathhouse walls themselves, reborn, whenever someone leaves poorer than they arrived. You run a cloth over your arms, scrubbing away the dock's salt stink, the tavern's stale ale, the alley's sickly rumor. For a moment, you almost feel new. Almost. A cough near your shoulder reminds you that no bath washes London clean for long. The walls sweat with more than steam whispers, bargains, mistakes made in heat and hidden in fog. You stand water sluicing from your skin. The cold air nips where warmth used to cling. You dress quickly, fingers clumsy with damp cloth. Outside, the wind will find you slip through your damp hair, tease your half-clean skin with a chill that says, you can't scrub London off so easily. Before you step back into the night, you drop a final farthing into the old woman's cracked palm. Her eyes flick up no blessing, no thanks, just a nod. That means you've paid for your place in this fleeting warmth. You push through the door, steam curling after you like a ghost of comfort left behind in the tub. The street greets you again, colder now, sharper. You smell of rosemary and faint soap. Maybe for tonight, that's enough armor against the city's next embrace. Back out in the night air, your skin prickles, where the bath's warmth fades too quickly into London's chill. The street lamps flicker fat tallow candles struggling behind soot-smudged glass. In the pools of weak yellow light, you catch glimpses of silk wool, rough linen, all weaving past one another like threads in a frayed tapestry. Here in Tudor England, what you wear says more about you than your name ever will. You slip down a narrow lane, lined with stalls selling scraps of fabric second-hand cloaks and the occasional bright ribbon, lifted perhaps from some noble's laundry line. You run your fingers over a bolt of deep green cloth, soft, finer than anything a dockhand or washer would dare claim. The seller squints at you. He knows your purse isn't fat enough for velvet, but he lets you look an unspoken kindness, or just a bored man's mercy. Sumptuary laws hover over you like an invisible snare. Only nobles can wear silk or velvet trimmed in sable. The statutes dictate who may wear what colors stain your sleeves, what fur warms your collar, what embroidery circles your cuffs. Some scholars debate whether these laws truly controlled the masses or merely gave the crown another excuse to fine those foolish enough to break rank. Either way, a silk doublet on your back tonight would cost you more than coin. It might cost you freedom, or worse. Near the corner of Paternoster Row, you spy a man adjusting his feathered cap, too fine for his boots, which are cracked and caked in river mud. He catches your stare, lifts his chin, and strides on as if the queen herself had kissed his hem. They say the quickest way to look important is to look expensive. But in London, the quickest way to be punished is to look richer than your rank allows. Rumors swirl of tailors hauled before the courts for stitching silk sleeves onto commoners' coats. Fines ruin them. Shame sticks longer than any stain. You duck into a clothier's stall, where rough wool lies folded next to plainer linen safe choices for someone like you. You weigh the cost of a new jerkin sturdy, scratchy, the kind that won't draw eyes, or the church's suspicion. A voice near your elbow, 2 apprentices whisper about a constable's son caught parading in silver-laced breeches he'd no right to wear. His father paid twice once to free the boy again to hush the whispers. Surviving London's social maze means knowing when your threadbare sleeves are your best disguise. Your eyes drift to a length of ribbon dyed bright saffron, the kind that says you've coin to waste on vanity. You imagine tying it at your wrist, a tiny rebellion. But your stomach reminds you there's dinner yet to be earned, and ribbons don't fill empty bellies. So you leave it draped over the stall's edge, walking on, before temptation knots around your wrist tighter than rope. You pass a pair of city watchmen near the pillory, laughing about last week's finds. One fingers a scrap of fine lace evidence lifted from a seamstress who dared stitch it for a baker's wife. They joke that the baker's bread was less expensive than his wife's sleeves. You wonder who paid more. In the end, the seamstress, fined into ruin, the wife paraded for shame, or the baker left with stale crusts and fresh gossip. Beyond the market, a rag seller drapes frayed cloaks over a wooden frame, hawking them to anyone desperate to hide tears or stains that mark you as poor as you truly are. You watch a mother slip her child into a patched wool coat sleeves too long, hem trailing muck. Some records claim sumptuary inspectors turned a blind eye to the truly ragged what's the point of finding a soul who can't even feed their children. Other accounts insist the crown's collectors never missed a chance to squeeze coin from even the barest purse. Your fingers tug at your own sleeve. It's rough, worn thin at the elbows. Nothing here to tempt the inspector's quill or a noble's disdain. A safe invisibility, and yet some part of you wonders if blending in too well means you'll vanish entirely. In Tudor London, survival is equal parts humility and defiance. Stay plain enough not to be noticed, yet shrewd enough to watch for moments when a flash of color might open doors you'd otherwise never touch. A gust of night wind lifts your hair, snags the reek of tallow smoke and stale fish from the market behind you. Ahead, the alleys narrow again, pulling you deeper into the city's hush. Silk sleeves, woolen caps, velvet linings. They're all costumes on this crooked stage. Tonight you walk it draped in plain cloth and borrowed caution. One day, maybe you'll wear silk honest, or stolen, or forged. Or maybe you'll stay in rough homespun forever, outlasting those who wagered everything on flaunting borrowed finery. Historians still argue how many broke the laws without ever being caught. How many fines lined the crown's coffers rather than the people's pockets. Your footsteps tap out a quiet promise. Tonight your clothes won't betray you. London has 1,000 other ways to test you first. If London has a pulse, it beats loudest in the open-air tangle of its street markets, an endless maze of stalls, criers, and watchful eyes waiting for a moment's slip. You push through the crush near Cheapside, where the smell of fresh fish wrestles with bruised apples and yesterday's turnips. Here, the city's hunger shows its teeth, and sometimes they're sharper than you'd like. The cobbles glisten under leftover rain and the juices of fishmongers' barrels. A woman in a linen cap bargains over a string of salted herring, while a butcher flies off a lump of dubious pork. You hover by a basket of bruised pears, fingers itching to test the skin. But you know better, reach too eagerly, and the stallholder's shout might mask a nimble hand slipping into your pocket. Pickpockets love the market. Some say they drift through the stalls like ghosts, but ghosts don't eat, they do. And you new to this swirl of elbows and sharp looks are exactly the fat purse they dream about. Of course, your purse is anything but fat, thin as your cloak, rattling with just enough coins to make you care if they vanish. A shout snaps your attention sideways. Two men are arguing beside a fish stall, one swearing the other lifted a trout from his pile. The monger joins in, waving a gutting knife like a conductor's baton. While eyes turn, a boy of 12, maybe younger, slips past a fruit vendor's cart, one hand deep in a customer's pouch. Smooth as river fog, he's gone before the man notices he's lighter by a week's bread. Historians still debate whether Tudor markets bred more thieves than any other part of London, or simply gave them better camouflage. A crowded stall is the perfect stage for a nimble-fingered act. Some constables swore the worst cut purses worked in pairs, one to bump your shoulder, the other to brush your purse. By the time you patted your hip in panic, they'd be 2 alleys away, arguing over who got the bigger share. You wander on, pretending you're invisible. You listen more than you look. A soft clash of coins. A child's squeal when an eel slithers from its basket. A beggar woman mumbling prayers while her eyes scan the crowd for a dropped loaf or a loose purse string. She locks eyes with you, then looks away. There's no charity here, only transactions. The market gives and takes with the same hand. At a stall near Bow Lane, you see a fishmonger's helper. Big arms, bigger grin, shouting about fresh cod, while 2 young lads hover too close to the piles of gleaming scales. You watch their dance. One asks, the price pokes. The fish's eyes laughs at the smell. The other edges behind a distracted buyer, fingers dipping with practiced care. A flick of the wrist, gone. A moment later, the helper notices his missing coppers. But by then, the boys are ghosts again, swallowed by the sea of hats and baskets. Somewhere overhead, church bells toll the hour. Merchants yell louder to drown the sound, hawking stale cheese and wormy apples like they're rare treasures from the east. The air prickles with the tang of wet wool, pickled onions, and human sweat. A boy shoves past you, no apology, just a grin that shows he still has all his teeth, unlike the fishwives yelling insults at him. You pause by a barrel of oysters you can't afford. A man beside you fumbles with his purse strings too long, too obvious. You clock the shadows moving near him, 2 shapes that slip and swirl behind hanging nets of onions. He catches you watching, follows your eyes, then clamps his hand over his coins, a breath too late. The pickpocket's gone, but the lesson lingers. Never flaunt what you can't defend. A soft drizzle starts to fall, slicking the cobbles and raising the smell of old scales and onion skins. The market doesn't close for rain. If anything, the weather makes people careless. Hoods pulled low, hands hidden in folds of damp cloth, senses dulled by the cold trickle down their spines. A bread seller shouts for buyers, 3 loaves for a penny, if you don't mind their yesterday's bake. You count your coins. Enough for a heel of bread, maybe an onion if you push your luck. You hand over your copper, feel the warmth of the loaf through the cloth. Small comfort. You check your purse twice before tying it deep inside your jerkin fingers, brushing the knot like a ward against the market's clever wolves. As you step away, you glimpse the fishmonger's helper, again squinting down the lane where the boys vanished. He knows they'll be back tomorrow. The stalls always fill up again, the same trick, played on different marks. Some scholars say London street thieves kept the city honest in their own crooked way, reminding the rich that fortune could slip as quick as a purse string. You pull your cloak tighter, loaf under your arm, eyes flicking to every shadow that moves too close. In Tudor London, a market feeds you if you're clever and starves you if you're careless. Today you keep your bread. Tomorrow, well, tomorrow you'll walk these stalls again and hope your fingers stay one step ahead of someone else's. The bread from the market is little more than a memory, by the time dusk folds its gray shawl over the city. You wipe the crumbs from your sleeve, mind, still turning over the knots of pickpockets and sharp eyes. But in Tudor London, a full belly is no armor at all, when your tongue might betray you quicker than any thief. One slip of a word, one ill-timed joke, and your fate could land in the hands of the church courts faster than you can swallow your last crust. You drift down a narrower lane, now drawn by the low hum of voices leaking from a crooked tavern door. The sign above swings in the breeze, a crude painted boar, its tusks chipped like half the patron's teeth inside. Within candlelight, flickers over tankards' elbows and secrets too careless to keep quiet. You step through the threshold shoulders, brushing the doorframe worn smooth by years of drinkers too drunk to mind splinters. Inside warmth hits you, stale ale bodies pressed too close, and the sharp tang of spilled beer soaking into rough floorboards. You find a corner near the hearth, where the shadows blur your presence safe enough to eavesdrop, warm enough to keep the night's damp from settling in your bones. A pair of men trade slurred jokes at a battered table nearby. One a stable hand, the other, by the look of his ink-stained cuffs, a petty clerk. Their laughter peels off the beams overhead, drawing side glances from a woman serving watered-down ale to a group of apprentices at the next bench. The clerk puffs up, launches into a tale about a priest's secret mistress, punctuated with a joke about the queen's pious appetite. The stable hand barks out a laugh so loud it jolts a rat from under the bench. It's harmless enough, or so it seems. But behind them, half in shadow, a man with a thin face and patient eyes picks at a crust of cheese. He watches the clerk, listens closer than any friend might. Some say the church courts keep such ears in every tavern, informants paid in coin or forgiveness, whichever buys silence cheaper. Surviving records show ordinary folk dragged before the parish, for offhand insults, fined for muttered blasphemies, forced to kneel at dawn prayers for words they barely remember saying. You cradle your empty mug, let your eyes wander the room. A boy no older than 15 nurses, a bruise under his eye, listening too intently to a pair of loud merchants swapping gossip about a local baker's wife caught stealing eggs from her own henhouse. The tale winds and bends until it lands somehow on whether the queen herself eats eggs on Fridays, half scandal, half boast. All it takes is one of these half-drunk tongues to wag too freely, and tomorrow's dawn might find someone in the stocks, neighbors spitting at them as they shiver in shame. Some scholars argue whether the church courts truly policed morality or simply kept a tight leash on restless mouths. Others say gossip was London's real law, everyone tattling on everyone to keep the city small enough to control. You wonder who might be listening to you right now. A snort, a snicker, the wrong tilt of your lips at another man's joke. Sometimes that's all it takes. A woman in a rough brown kirtle sits nearby, smoothing crumbs from her apron as she leans close to an old cooper, murmuring something about a new preacher who promises to pardon sins for coin. Her words slip like honey sweet at first, until you remember they stick like flies to bread. You sip the last drops from your mug, wishing you had a few pence for another round, something to keep your tongue too wet to wag. The stable hand's laugh crackles again. He says something crude about the bishop's girth, how the man's belly blocks half the pulpit. The clerk wheezes, pounding the table. You don't miss how the thin-faced listener tucks this morsel away behind a tight-lipped smile. He slides from his bench before the next round coat, hem brushing yours as he passes. Maybe he's off for another pint. Or maybe tomorrow morning he'll be at the church's back door, trading your neighbor's careless joke for a blessing and a warm loaf. A hush rides the air for a moment, broken only by the hiss of a fresh log settling into the hearth. In that silence, you feel the weight of your own mouth, your tongue, your teeth, your fragile slip of breath that could cost you your name, your coin, your place in a city that devours secrets and punishes truth told too freely. You stand, pull your collar high, and slide out before the clerk's next story buries you in its echo. Outside, the street air bites cold at your cheeks, but at least it doesn't ask you what you've heard or who you might tell. London's alleys coil tighter around your steps. In Tudor England, blasphemy costs more than bread, and no market stall sells forgiveness cheap. The tavern's warmth fades behind you, replaced by the sharp kiss of night air laced with chimney smoke and the faint sour tang of yesterday's refuse still clinging to the gutters. London, after dark, is a different creature, entirely quieter in its corners, yet louder, where shame stands in full view, nailed down in wood for all to see. You hug the shadows along the lane, drawn by the dull roar of a crowd and the flicker of torchlight that makes the night seem alive with jeers and rotten vegetables. Ahead, the stocks and pillory stand like crooked sentinels at the crossroads. By day, they bake in the sun. By night, they become theater-free entertainment for anyone with an old cabbage and a bit of venom to spare. You edge closer, careful to keep your head down, blending with the fringe of onlookers. A man stands bound in the pillory wrists and neck locked in place by rough-hewn timber. His shirt is torn, where turnips and spoiled eggs have found their mark. A child giggles as her mother hands her another clod of dirt to lob at the captive's face. Some say these public punishments were the only true justice the common folk could afford humiliation in place of heavy fines or prison time. Historians argue over whether the pillory served order or simply fed the city's hunger for spectacle. Tonight, you see the answer, written in the crooked grins and greasy fingers clutching handfuls of wilted greens. Here, crime is a carnival punishment, more about the crowd's delight than any lesson the poor soul in the stocks might learn. You slip through the throng, catching snatches of rumor about the man's crime. Some swear he swindled a fishwife at market. Others claim he mocked a constable's limp. Or maybe he owed a butcher's boy for a pig he never paid for. Truth hardly matters once the timber closes and the jeers begin. A stone whistles past your shoulder, too close. You flinch, drawing your cloak tighter, reminding yourself that all it takes is one unpaid debt, one foolish jest, and you might find your own chin resting on splintered oak. Near the stocks, a second figure hunches with head-bowed legs through holes that clamp her ankles tight. She's older hair, a wild tangle of gray, and grease dress crusted with the damp of spilled ale and whatever else the crowd has chosen to throw. A boy tugs at your sleeve, whispers she's here for cursing her landlord in church. You glance at her lips, swollen cracked. Perhaps they muttered truth sharper than the church liked. Some records hint that stocks and pillories made as much money for the city as they cost. Each fine paid up front, each jeer a tax on shame. A shout breaks through the air. A young man steps forward, flings a soft tomato that splats across the pilloried man's ear. Laughter rolls through the crowd like thunder. You half smile despite yourself. There's a twisted camaraderie in watching another soul's disgrace. It makes your own hidden debts and muttered curses feel safer smaller. Yet even here, there's a game to play. Some of the clever ones in the pillory twist their shame into coin. A ragged man at the far end of the row wears a painted sign around his neck. Drunkard and liar, it says. But at his feet sits a battered hat, half filled with pennies, tossed by passers-by who admire the flourish of his drunken bow each time someone lands a hit. Some scholars claim these petty criminals turned punishment into performance-surviving shame by selling their humiliation as street theater. No record tells if they felt less cold when the stocks finally opened and the coins jingled back home in their pockets. A constable drifts along the row lantern bobbing. He barks at a boy, aiming stones too large to be fair sport. The boy ducks behind his mother's skirts, grinning with the smug thrill of near mischief. London's punishment is never just about the guilty, it teaches the watchers too. Stay small, stay quiet, pay your debts, and keep your tongue tied when the ale flows too freely. You lean closer for a final look. The man in the pillory lifts his head just enough to meet your gaze. Eyes, bloodshot mouth, twisted in a grin that dares you to laugh or pity him. He spits missing your boot by a whisper. Maybe he deserves the stocks. Maybe he doesn't. The pillory doesn't care. It only cares that you watch, that you join the city's chorus of stifled disgust and hidden glee. A sudden gust of wind rattles the torch flames, sending shadows flickering across the gathered faces. You shiver, reminded how thin the line is between the watchers and the watched. You step back, turn away before your coins, and your tongue betray you. As the jeers fade behind you, you slip into the night feet, quickening over wet cobbles. Another lesson tucked under your cloak, one more rule in a city that demands you bow your head, mind your debts, and keep your jokes private. Unless you fancy becoming tomorrow's cheap entertainment, the echoes of mocking laughter cling to you long after the pillory fades behind. London's streets at night feel wider now, emptier somehow, as if the city sighs between its bouts of spectacle and punishment. But the quiet is thin, full of rustles behind shuttered doors and footfalls you can't see until they're too close. This is when London's other watchers emerge, those who trade the day's petty crimes for the shadow's larger secrets. You follow a curve of lanterns strung along an alley, too narrow for a cart, your boots scraping the cobbles slick with drizzle. Up ahead, two men lean together, beneath an iron sconce, its feeble flame casting their broad shadows against a brick wall. Their cloaks are rough, their shoes cracked badges of the city's working poor. But pinned to each man's breast is a small tin badge, the crooked star of the Night Watch. Some say the Night Watchmen are the city's final line between order and chaos. Others claim they're the biggest crooks of all, drunk, more often than sober, bribed, more often than thanked. Historians still argue whether the watch did more harm than good, or simply kept London's alleyways from swallowing fools whole. Tonight, you'll decide for yourself which version you believe. The taller of the two sees you, lifts his chin in a half nod. Out late, are you? His voice scrapes the edge of friendly and dangerous, like a blade dulled by too many scabbards. You shrug, pretend your hands aren't balled into your sleeves. He gestures with his lantern, a yellow eye that swings over your face, your threadbare coat, your empty palms. No trouble here. Not tonight. They drift ahead, boots clopping through puddles, halberds tapping against door frames. They knock twice on a tavern shutter, exchanging a word with a boy who slips them a flask. Paid off in gin or coin, it hardly matters. Their shadows dance ahead of you, pausing when an alley mouth coughs out a shape too quick to place. A cat maybe, or something with sharper teeth. You fall in behind them, close enough to share the faint bubble of safety their badges pretend to offer. A woman leans out an upper window, emptying a chamber pot with a careless splash that narrowly misses your shoulder. The taller watchman swears, shakes his fist at her cackle. Even they can't control the city's filth when gravity helps it along. At the next corner, a hunched figure melts from a doorway. A young man with a limp, his eyes flicking to the watchman's badges before he offers up a greasy grin. He slips a halfpenny into the shorter one's hand. It vanishes into the watchman's coat, and so does the man, free to drift down the lane with no questions asked. Some rumors claim the watch made more money turning blind eyes than catching thieves. Surviving court records hint at bribes noted in margins, whole trials undone, when coins change pockets in the dark. You know better than to linger too long. The taller watchman turns, gives you a squint that says you've shared enough of their lantern's glow. Best move on. Let them patrol the next street without your eyes marking which back doors they tap on for hush money or hot ale. You slip down a narrower lane, away from their boots and clinking halberds. The night grows thicker, here shadows stretching between buildings like webs. Your footfalls soften over straw scattered to soak up rain. Somewhere, a dog barks, once silenced by a curse or a thrown boot. You keep to the wall, one eye on the flicker of torchlight far behind you. Near Cripplegate, you find another pair of watchmen, hunched under a dripping awning, sharing a pipe that sputters in the drizzle. They barely glance at you, too busy laughing about a merchant's boy caught sneaking out a back window with 2 wheels of stolen cheese strapped to his belly. Couldn't run for all the dairy, one wheezes, smacking his thigh. You wonder if the boy paid them off or spent the night trussed up next to the stocks you passed earlier. Either way, the watch will wake tomorrow with heavier purses than their wages can explain. A sharp crack snaps your head up, just a door slammed too hard in the wind. But your heart hammers in your throat all the same. The city at night is never empty, never truly asleep. Some secrets crawl through these streets as freely as rats in the bakery cellars. The watch may catch a thief now and then, but they can't catch the cold hunger of those who stalk the darkness for a coin or a careless step. As you near the edge of the ward, you see the watchman pause beneath a crooked sign, a faded crest marking the parish boundary. They lean their halberds against the wall, slump onto a barrel. Their heads nod forward. Sleep steals them as easily as any thief. In the end, London keeps its own peace. Or doesn't. You pull your collar tighter, eyes flicking back once at the snoring watch. Good luck to them. Good luck to you too. The alleys won't forgive either of you if you wander too soft tonight. You slip away from the sleeping watchman boots, brushing puddles that glimmer like black glass in the guttered lamplight. The air tastes of rain and something sharper, like ink. And old sweat signs, you're nearing the borough's legal heart, where Tudor London's courts do their brisk, brutal business. They say justice here moves faster than a pickpocket's hand, cheaper too, if you have coin or a cousin in the right pew. A stone archway leads you into the yard behind a timbered hall, its windows flickering with candlelight that leaks secrets down onto the cobbles. You press closer, drawn by the hum of voices, men arguing over insults, debts, accusations, half-whispered and half-shouted. Inside these walls, the truth is less about what's right than who can spin it quicker. Some scholars claim the average trial took less time than your last mug of ale and insult, a push of bloodied nose, than verdict and punishment, all before the next candle guttered out. You slip along the hall's edge until you find a crack in the shutters, just wide enough to see the room within. A cluster of townsfolk shuffles on worn benches, heads bent together in tired worry. At the front, a magistrate squints at a parchment, while a bailiff leans on his staff as if it might keep him from nodding off altogether. Beside them, a barrel-chested man stands, accused arms crossed over a tunic still stained with last night's drink. He glowers at a neighbor, thin, sharp-nosed, pointing a bony finger and spitting out accusations like stale breadcrumbs. A tavern brawl you gather from the snippets that drift out. A spilled pint turned to an insult to a broken tooth to a complaint in the city's ear. No barristers here for the poor, just words and witnesses, friends or foes. It hardly matters which, when reputation can be bought for the price of tomorrow's breakfast. Historians still puzzle over how many innocent souls paid the price for another man's clever tongue.